So we're speaking about the inner makeshift of the Benoni. The Benoni is the person who has full control over his animal soul with his divine soul. We each have two souls. The divine soul is the one that ought to be in control, and the Benoni has reached that level in which the divine soul is in control of the animal soul, which has all these animalistic instincts, which are part of the human experience. But we're speaking more particularly here in chapter 16 about the heart, the desire, the intention behind the actions that are again completely aligned with the divine soul by the Benoni. Whatever the Benoni does, it's because that's what God wants him to do. At every point, at every level, at every moment of the day, it's a hard level to achieve, but that's the Benoni. That's the person we're speaking about. Now, sometimes though, as we've been saying, it's hard for the Benoni to have the full intention aligned with the action. Action again is divinely guided, but the intention is not always there. Sometimes he knows what he has to do and he does it, but he doesn't necessarily want to do that which he has to do. And we're speaking about, tools, exercises of how to spark that want. But it is very clear that even though the want is not there, the action must still be there. And therefore, even if a person doesn't feel like he should be doing something that is right, he should still do it. Now, one of the tools that was offered is, for example, meditation or contemplation about God's creation. When you contemplate on God's creation, then it arouses this love towards God, whether it's creation from within, whether it's, again, the nature that we have here in Arizona, which is so beautiful and truly divine, or whether it's contemplation from within, not from just without, but from within, maybe the human body, the human life altogether. But when you contemplate God's creation, it arouses this love, and then this intention comes more easily. Now, we can, one last thing we said, and then we'll continue here, but last week we ended by saying that, we're very good as human beings to do that which we need to do, even though the desire is not there for ourselves. Right? Sometimes we don't want to go to the gym, but we go to the gym because we know it's what we need to do. Sometimes we don't want to sleep, but we go to sleep because we have to, even though we may not want to. And there's so many other things also. But what about for others? You know that you have to do A, B, and C for the other, but the want is not there. So then we suddenly are compromising people. Then we say, oh, for us, yeah, we'll do it. For others, no. And really, that too should be aligned. That as much as I do what I need to do for myself, even though my desire is not there, so too I should do what I need to do for others, even though my desire may not be there. Anyway, that's the main subject here. And let's continue. Middle of page 16. I encourage questions, comments, disagreements. That's what it's all about. Let's go. Does anyone want to read? Middle of page 65. Note. Anyone?
I'll read if nobody else
Okay,
wants to.
please go for it, Margaret.
Okay. Note, the reason for this is that the vitality of this person's intellect and nefesh, ruach, and neshama is derived from the so-called ibur, pregnancy, and concealment within the supernal understanding, and not from the quality of birth and revelation, as it is known to those familiar with the esoteric discipline.
Right. There's some deep Kabbalistic terms here, but I'll let you continue with the commentary, and then we'll delve into them. Go for it.
Okay. The author explains in this note why someone's intellect might not become revealed in his heart. The problem, he says, is not a lack of intellectual capacity or insufficient contemplation. Rather, this is a far more basic issue relating to the entire soul. His nefesh, ruach, and neshama are at work here. Other works describe the two stages in the development of emotions: Ibur, pregnancy, and Leda, birth. Ibur is a stage of concealment and internal development. Leda is revelation and outward manifestation. When people whose souls are in the state of birth, with a concurrent unveiling of their cerebral and emotional powers, experience an intellectual arousal, a wave of of activity is automatically unleashed in their heart as well. In those whose souls are in a state of pregnancy and whose powers are not revealed, the actions and responses of their souls unfold on a hidden, less sentient level.
Mhm.
When the mind is in Iber, thoughts operate in creative mode. As long as that continues, no finalization is reached, no complete picture drawn from the mind's perceptions can be realized, nor can the latter create active and overt emotions in regard to the perceptions. One's sense of emotional distance depends on how well the soul in general, and not only its intellectual component, has developed. The more extensive its development, the greater the integration between its intellectual aspects and its network of emotion and activity. The less evolved the soul is, the wider the gap between its apprehension and its revealed sensitivities and experiential modes.
Right. So just to put it in maybe more practical terms, so and I'm using again Robert Steinsaltz's analogies here, but the there has to be a synchronicity between all parts of the human being for the human being indeed to reach this complete form in which both the desire and the action is aligned, and not just the action towards ourselves, but the action towards others, as we say. And he would use the analogy, I don't know, I don't know how artistic every one of you is, but he says some people are like Picasso people, and some more are more like Rembrandt people.
Hmm.
Rembrandt was a very accurate painter who painted all sorts of human beings in with great skill and accuracy. Picasso, as we know, one eye is here, and nose is there, and you have all sorts of limbs everywhere. Now, uh, some people have their intellect developed, and then their head is takes a big place here on the canvas, but their heart is very small, and then it looks like a Picasso painting. The complete person is almost like the Rembrandt person, where the intellect is fully developed, the heart is fully developed, the hands, the action is fully developed, and and so is the rest of the body. And this is what this is saying, just on a more simplistic level, obviously. But in Kabbalah, we believe in these two stages of growth. There's the Ibur, the pregnancy, and that's when we are still trying to develop our own limbs, our own inner making. And then there is the birth in which we come out now, like a Rembrandt painting, like fully. Of course, this is spiritual. So some people are still developing now their heart. Their action might not be there yet. So, but their heart is fully developed, almost like a fetus. And I don't really know medically, how we develop and if it's one organ at a time or not. I'm sure it's the totality of the being too that is being developed at the same time. But sometimes you have this asymmetry, and in many ways, the Benoni, again, the person that we're speaking about here in chapter 16, is someone that is constantly working. Not that he's achieved the ultimate result yet, but he's constantly working on developing every part of his being so that he has a complete symmetry between all of them. So that if his action is not there, then he forces himself towards action. Or if his emotion is not there, then, like we said, he contemplates, and so on and so forth. And that's the Ibur versus the Leida, the pregnancy versus the birth. Some people are still in the Ibur, in the pregnancy stage, where it's a kind of a Picasso painting, and some are more of on the Leida, more complete. They're on the birth stage. Now, that's one concept that was mentioned here. Another concept is Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. There are 5 levels to the soul according to Kabbalah. Most of us function really on level 1, maybe if we're lucky on level 2, and if we're tremendously lucky on level 3. But there are 5 levels, and I'll just go over them very briefly. But Nefesh is the lower level. It's the level that is affected by this world, that reacts to this world. Motions on that level, all sorts of feelings on that level. Of course, our bodies on that level because it interacts with this world. Maybe our psyche is on that level. Then you have Ruach, which means spirit, and that's more the spiritual being. That's not so much how the world affects me. It's really more how my own spiritual self affects me. Sometimes you feel like you can conquer the world. You wake up in the morning and you're spiritually alive. That's because that's the spirit in you that's been activated. That ruach. And we recognize too that we are not just what we eat, we're not just what we feel, and we are not just what we do, but we are also spiritual. We are what our spiritual self really wants to achieve. Now, that expresses itself in all sorts of ways, sometimes in our connection with God, sometimes in just a refined connection with others. Sometimes it's in thinking before we act. That's a spiritual self. So that's the spirit. And then you have the neshama, which is the actual soul, the soul of the human being that only has one question really that guides it, and that is not what I want for me; it's what God wants of me. And based on that, the soul channels the spirit and the nefesh to act upon. So that neshama is in the driver's seat. A person is completely aligned with God and with his neshama, again, with his own piece of God within, that he's able to function like that 24/7. It's not easy because we are reactionary human beings. We are human beings that have our own personal, egotistic, sometimes feelings, and we have the world affecting us. But this is, I'm above the world. I don't care much about the world. It's what God wants of me now. It's not so much about, what the world is telling me or what the world is pulling me in all sorts of directions. That's the neshama. That's really on a very simplistic level. Now, what there are two additional levels called chaya and yechida, and those levels really don't necessarily function within the dimensions of this world or the dimensions of the self, but they really remain up there in heaven. I think we've spoken about this, but they're almost like a GPS from the heavens. Our entire soul does not come down. Again, two levels of the soul remain above, and they send us all sorts of signals. That's why sometimes we have this intuition, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, or maybe I should do this. And that's because there's a signal from above that the Chaya and Yechida are sending down to the rest of the soul, saying, we can see the full picture from a divine standpoint, and therefore should do this or should not do this. Um, that's why, by the way, in Hebrew, we also say Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov doesn't just mean good luck, but it means good dripping. Mazel means dripping, from the word nozel, because we say that we should be so aligned with the two levels of the soul that remain up there that they can drip fluidly to the lower soul, and we can receive the signals without interruption. I don't know if I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry, but one of the stories I love that really demonstrate this so powerfully is a story about Arik Sharon. It was the prime minister of Israel. Beforehand, he was a big general in the Israeli army. And he once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose yahrzeit, by the way, will be in exactly a week from today. It's 31st yahrzeit. But he once came to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, I think it was in 1977, uh, just before he left he's from JFK. He was on a visit here in New York, and he went to see, again, the Lubavitcher Rebbe that lived in New York. And he planned it so that he would go from that meeting to JFK and back home to Israel. And when he came to the Rebbe saw him looking at his watch, and he said, "Why are you looking at your watch?" And he says, "Because I have a flight to catch." He says, "No, no, no, we have a lot to speak about. You'll catch the next flight." Now, Arik Sharon, if the Rebbe tells you that, so you have to stay. All right. And they spoke for a long time. And obviously, he missed his flight. But the flight that he missed was hijacked by Algerian terrorists.
Wow.
And on his visit the next time, when he came back to America, he went back to the Rebbe and he said to him, "I have two things to tell you. First of all, thank you for saving my life, because the flight that you made me miss was hijacked by Algerian terrorists. I, as a general in the Israeli army, would have surely been tortured or killed. But I have another thing to tell you, and that's a complaint to file. If you knew that the plane was going to be hijacked, how come you didn't save the entire plane?" And the Rebbe said as follows: "You think I knew? You think I knew that the plane was going to be hijacked? And I told you to stay. Those were the words that God put in my mouth." And I'm saying some people, like the Rebbe, are so holy, so in sync. They're a Rembrandt painting, not a Picasso painting, so to speak. And their sole desire is to do that which God wants them to do at every moment of the day. Then the neshama is in the driver's seat, that their dripping flows without any type of hindrance. And therefore, what they do is what God does through them. What they say is what God says through them. And that's what he was saying. That's what the Rebbe was saying. I told you, you think I knew? That's the words that came out. But that's the ultimate synchronization here. And that's the Chaya and Yechida that are completely one with the other three levels of Neshama, Nefesh, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh. Now, what does that have to do here with this, with the Ibur and the Leda, the pregnancy and the birth? So again, it has a lot to do because if I am in sync with my neshama, again, my neshama, my soul that asks, what does God want of me, is in the driver's seat, then the Chaya and Yechida also aligned, those two levels of the soul. And then I'm in a stage of birth, of completion. Now, yes, the Beinoni has to work on it all the time. Doesn't come, it's not on cruise control. But that person is wholesome. It's complete. And if it's true physically, it's certainly true spiritually. Some people, I mean, anyone who goes and exercises know that they have to exercise on, the entire body, yes, in stages, this day, this. But you can't just exercise your biceps, your arms, your whatever. You have to work on everything. And here the Beinoni tries to work on everything, also spiritually. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama, and then chaya chida are aligned. And that's really what this is saying. Okay, I know I spoke a lot and I don't want to be monologuing, so please feel free to ask your questions, comments, disagreements, and so
I have a
on.
question.
Yes, please.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for speaking a lot.
No,
I
please.
appreciate that because I'm always learning. What about the people that I can think of that need acknowledgement of their mitzvot, of their things? Where does that fit in?
Right. That's a great question. So, where would that come from? From which level of the soul would that come from?
Ego, I would think. Is it? I don't know.
Sorry?
Is it their ego? I don't know.
Yeah, the ego. So, the ego is the nefesh, is the lowliest level of the soul. Because if they need acknowledgement, um, then there's certainly some ego involved there. So, that's the nefesh. But again, the closer you are to nefesh, the further you are from selflessness, from humility, from being that channel for God. Because the channel is not giving any room for God. It's almost like uh, someone once came to a great Hasidic master and he said, he started complaining. He said, I feel like wherever I go, people are stepping all over me. So it's the Tzemach Tzedek. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, well, if you didn't spread your ego everywhere, people wouldn't be stepping over you everywhere. So, be humble. uh, it's because in fact, the Talmud says that when a person has arrogance, then then God proclaims that he and I cannot live in the same room together. Why? Because he takes up all the space. So the closer I'm to my neshama, the more I realize that it's not me, it's God, and I'm just a vessel. Just like again the Rebbe speaking God's words. The further you are from the neshama, the more you function on the nefesh level, then the more ego is involved, and the more you are dictated by your ego, your personal feelings, your emotions, the more the world has an effect on you. So yes, I would say it's nefesh. Now, let me just clarify one point, and that is Maimonides writes about this. That
Yeah.
is that sometimes you should have your name. Say you gave a donation and you want to appear as anonymous. You have to think about that because although you may want to be humble and so on, but if your name is on it and it will inspire others that otherwise would not give to give, then you should have your name because then you're encouraging others to do a mitzvah.
Hmm.
So, if Mr. Smith gave and Mr. Smith's friend is going to see, oh, my friend gave, so therefore I should give too. And without that Mr. Smith, he would have never given. Then maybe Mr. Smith should think about putting his name up, even though his instinct is a soul instinct, is a neshama instinct, and therefore tells him not to put it on. So it's not like every donation has to be anonymous, but if someone is demanding it, then certainly it's the ego speaking, it's the nefesh, and that person lives on the nefesh level.
Rabbi, I think
Yes,
the biggest challenge for me and maybe for other people too is to recognize the so-called drippings. Like I have sometimes intuition. And so is this intuition something that is God telling me something, or is it something like how do I how do I recognize,
right.
what it's
So
kind
the
of a
Tanya actually, this book, right, speaks about this quite a bit. Later on in the late 20s, chapter 20s, but um, there are multiple methods. One is usually your intuition will lead you to action. God wants action. So if you have an intuition that says, uh, you know, maybe you should go pray now while someone needs help and someone just fell, then you know that it's not holy. Your prayer is the animal soul telling you this. So into and he speaks about this, I think, in chapter 28. But usually, you have to ask whether there's going to be is my intuition right? If the intuition is going to lead to a veritable change through action, then it's probably right. That's number one. Two, there's no doubt that one needs mentors. One needs at least a mentor to be able to guide that person and see if that intuition was really divine, was that dripping or not. Number three, I think that intuition, the greater a person lives again on the neshama level, the more the intuition will be real intuition or neshama intuition or chaya chida intuition. Sorry. Um, so it also depends on the life of a person. Um, but I would also say that if it's dripping, then usually it's almost stronger than you. You really, the intuition is just very, very telling. Um, I know someone here in the community that owns a high-tech company, and he was about to sign a very big deal with another high-tech company, and he was telling me about it just last week. And everything looked good on paper, but he said to himself, I can't. That was the dripping. And he didn't sign it. And it turned out that there was some very bad forgeries involved on the other side. So so if it's strong like that, then other methods too, but it's a good question. It's a good question. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Therefore, you need a mentor. I think you always need to not just have a sounding board, because the sounding board means that at the end of the day, I never liked that expression, by the way. Sounding board means that at the end of the day, you're only listening to yourself, just like an echo, right? The voice comes back to you. So you don't want a sounding board. You really want a mentor that absorbs the voice, doesn't echo it, and at the same time also is able to analyze it in the most divine way and then come back to you with a divine answer.